Well, hello everyone. Mr. Martinez here. Let me adjust this a little bit. There we go. Make sure you can see everything in the Z picture. And this is going to be lesson part 2 of the Middle Ages. Going to conclude what we started. And as always, take your time, process the information, do your very best, and we'll get through this. So here we go. So we left off with manorialism, and manorialism is basically life in and around the castle. It's an economic system around a lord's manor or castle. This is how everything functioned, whether it be farming, processing the food, and other items for the lord and the knights, and eventually the king. The manor included a village and the land surrounding it, and understand that the manor is basically the castle. So castle life is another way to remember it. Everything around it was included in this village. Each group in society had their own job and responsibility to fulfill. Everyone knew what they were supposed to do, and they did it. So that's manorialism. And the castle was self-sufficient, did not require any help, no trade, anything. This was a self-contained living unit in and around the castle. This brings us to the Crusades. Now, much has been said about the Crusades and their impact on Europe. A lot of the issues and disagreements that are in the world today can be traced back to the Crusades. So what were they? Well, in 1050, the Turks invaded the Byzantine Empire and conquered Palestine, or the Holy Land. And as a result of this, people living in Europe felt that it was their duty, their responsibility to take it back. Now, the Muslims and Jews considered this their Holy Land. They considered this special to them for many reasons, which I'll get into later. There's also a few videos I'd like to show you, and I'm working on how to do that. But if I can figure it out, you'll be able to watch them and get the information in that way as well. But suffice to say, Muslim, Jews, and Christians consider this their holy land. Okay? Pope called for a crusade to free the Holy Land. And it might sound very just, let's free them from the Muslims. But the reality was the Pope was trying to get power, and in doing so, launched this crusade and used force to free the land. Now, it's a picture of Jerusalem. You can see the Dome of the Rock, wall. Many scholars believe that the temple was actually over here, and recently I've been watching videos that says, and this is going to go off the screen, and the temple was actually over here. So people are still trying to figure it out, but this is the real estate that everyone's been fighting over. So what were the reasons for the crusade? Still a little crooked, I have to fix that. Well, the Pope wanted to increase his power. Having a successful campaign against that area would give them power. As we've learned before, they wanted power to control, whether it's for good or bad, it's for history to judge, but they wanted power. Christians believed it was their duty to recover the Holy Land. This is the place where Christians believe many of the historic items in Christianity had occurred. They wanted the land back. Now, up until this point, they really didn't care about it. There were Christians, Jews, and Muslims living in the land peacefully, no problems, no issues. The Muslims conquered the Byzantine Empire, the last of the Roman Empire, and all of a sudden, ooh, it's a big deal now. So nobles wanted to gain wealth. If you get land, you get more resources, you get money. So the nobles wanted to gain wealth. Believe it or not, there are people that wanted to seek adventure. They wanted to travel and have excitement and enjoy travel. Enjoy seeing the land. And sadly, that was not the case. Most of them died along the way. And the serfs, remember as we learned, who were tied to the land, hoped to escape feudal oppression. They were able to leave their land, or the land I should say, and go fight and be free. And sadly, they also died along the way as well. So what was the impact? What was the result of the Crusades? Well, a major result of the Crusades include cultural diffusion, meaning the cultures affected each other and influenced each other, and through it they gained ideas and things that have been lost during the Dark Ages. Increase in trade. All of a sudden people started to think, hey, life around the castle, there's more out there. It's not just living here. European interest in goods and from the East was stimulated by crusaders who brought back many things. They came back from the Middle East with silk, spices, perfumes, different types of food. And as we learned about the Middle Ages, it was very, very boring, very dark and gloomy, just sad in some ways. And now they're bringing back vibrancy, life. And people are like, hey, what is this place? This is interesting. As the Crusades ended, ships that were once used to carry soldiers carried trade goods. And here's the big one. Merchants from rich Italian city-states, such as Venice and Florence, dominated this trade. And this goes out to my student, and you know who you are, who has been waiting for references to Venice and Florence and Italy all school year. Well, here it is. This is why when we get to the Renaissance, it was dominated and began in Italy. So make sure you write all this down. Moving on. This brings us to the bubonic plague, or the Black Death. And I find it highly interesting that as we study this part of history, what is occurring in the world today with the COVID-19 virus. And you're going to see that as bad as the COVID-19 virus is, the Black Death was much worse. Not to say that every life that has been lost to this virus isn't important or precious. It is. But compared to the Black Death or the bubonic plague, it is very, 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 very small. But we'll see what happens. I'm hoping for the best. If we were in class right now and we were talking, I'm going to be sharing probably a little bit more about statistics and things. But we're going to go through this in a historical way. So, plague was highly infectious disease spread by the fleas on rats. Rats were common in the cities of this time. And they didn't know how it spread for a long time, and eventually they figured it out. But it was much later, and by this time the disease had run its course, but millions of people had died. You'll see the number in a moment. This outbreak appeared in China 1,300 years ago with deaths of about, and do you see the number? I'm going to show it to you. 35 million. So, put that in perspective. Horrible, horrible plague. Just so sad, all the lives that were lost. And they didn't know how to stop it. The plague can be treated today, but you have to catch it fast. Antibiotics have been successful. But at this time, there weren't any. And so when you caught something like this, unless your body built the natural immunity to it, that was it. It was a global epidemic that spread through the increased trade between countries. People kept spreading it because, it's ironic that had they maintained their isolation in the castles, it probably wouldn't have been so bad. But because trade started to occur, it spread even more. Between 1347 and 53, killed one person out of every 3 in Europe, over 25 million. So if you put the 25 million and 35 million together, you have 60 million people died from the plague. 60 million. And we haven't seen a plague like that since. Just sad. I'm thinking about what's going on today. It's important that everybody does what they need to do to be well, to be protected. But at this time, there's nothing they could have done, short of isolating themselves. But again, they didn't realize that. And some of the things they came up with were very interesting, as it says in your book, which I will leave there. Just very sad. Here's a map of the spread, and I historically, very similar to what's happening today. Except right now, Spain is really being ravaged by COVID-19. But you have England, you have Sweden, Norway, Central Europe, Italy. Very, very, very painful time, and you can see the degree by looking at the map and the legend of how it increased and where it went. So, very sad. But this transformed Europe. This transformed the Middle Ages. And believe it or not, the plague is one of the reasons why the Renaissance eventually came. And here's why. And I'm just going to put it all up there for you to see. Feudalism, what it was, became nobles, the middle class, and peasants. We talked extensively about the middle class and nobles and how all that worked. Manors eventually became money lending, banking, insurance places. Church is all-knowing. People began to question the church. A secular view began to rise. Not that they questioned religion necessarily, but how the Catholic Church functioned and practiced Christianity. The Black Death, people began to celebrate life and joy. Humanism, we'll go into that later. People began to focus on the afterlife. Now it's the now. Let's enjoy now. If that sounds familiar, because that's how our society operates. In feudalism, it was the group. Today, or not back today, how it changed is the focus on the individual. And this would directly lead to the founding of the United States of America. We'll get to that a few lessons from now. So, trade fairs and growth of cities, what happened? Along the trades, fairs were established in towns with larger populations, major crossroads. Again, this is how the plague spread. People began to interact with each other. Merchants, craftsmen settled in these towns, and some grew to be cities of several thousand people, which had been unheard of since the fall of Rome in 476 AD. Remember that date. This altered the way people lived in Europe, marked the beginning of the end of feudalism. Serfs began to pay their feudal obligations with money instead of service. They started to earn a living. The idea of work instead of being a servant and just getting your pay from the land. Now there was a monetary system, coins, bills. In fact, I saw how money has changed throughout history, and one of the things they used to have were these big copper plates that they used as money, which is completely impractical. But the idea of having money, writing a check, having credit, all these things came about after feudalism ceased to be. An economy based on money, not barter, emerged. Now you exchange money for an item. Instead of I'll give you a chicken, you give me a horse, which would be a completely unfair exchange, but you get the idea. All right, go back for a moment. And this would lead to the Renaissance. And that is going to be our next course of study. However, there's going to be probably another video on feudalism. I might have a few videos for you to watch. I'll post the links. I have to figure that out, how to work. But the next thing we're going to be learning about after feudalism is the Renaissance. And I hope you enjoyed this video. This is the lesson part 2 of the Middle Ages. Make sure you're taking notes. Make sure you're doing the work I have assigned to you. And we will continue to go from here. You guys get a good, nice thumbs up again because you're doing a good job. And till next time, Mr. Martinez out.